Welcome to another vocabulary lesson. Today we're looking at feelings, and these words don't only cover feelings actually, they cover a lot of personality adjectives, and many of these words we can use with not just people but things like an audacious an attempt, an audacious plan, a daring mission. So they're not only for how people feel, but they all cover feelings as well. But many of them are character adjectives too. Now I've tried to put the more positive ones over here and the more negative ones over here. I hope that's all clear. I hope that will help you understand the meaning. And I've also tried to group them using these dotted lines into not exact groups, but rough groups where you can see that, for example, these ones generally mean happy. These ones generally mean brave in some kind of way. These generally mean intelligent or clever in some kind of way. These generally mean confident, and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to spend too long on each word because, as you can see, there are lots. So let's get going. Blissful is a synonym of happy, really, but it collocates very well. I mean, it's used very often in marriages. You can have a blissful marriage or a blissful relationship, but you can also live in blissful ignorance. And I think that's a very common collocation. It means that you are happily unaware about something. And so there may be some things that you don't want to know because you think you will be happier not knowing them. And so, for example, perhaps you don't want to know the day of your death. And you might say, I'm happy to live in blissful ignorance concerning how exactly I will die. And I think most of us would feel the same. Elated also means happy in some kind of way, very similar to overjoyed, and you can be elated about something, or you can be also elated to do something. Same with overjoyed. You can be overjoyed about something, or you can be overjoyed to do something. And so that's how we use these words. You can also be delighted with something, glad about something, pleased about something, delighted about something too. But you could be delighted with your present, yeah, something like that. And so all of these mean very happy, very glad, very pleased about something. You could also be over the moon, which means absolutely ecstatic about something, really, really pleased, really very, absolutely delighted about something. Please remember, strong adjectives, non-gradable adjectives will take absolutely, and gradable adjectives like glad or pleased will take very. So you could be over the moon to hear that your friends have just got married. You could be ecstatic that there's a new baby in your family. But you can also talk about an ecstatic crowd, an ecstatic group of people. And you can certainly talk about jubilant fans, which means fans, perhaps they've watched their team and they've won a match. And so the fans were jubilant about the victory. And so, yeah, very often about for these words would be the preposition, jubilant about something, overjoyed about something, delighted about something. And you could also have delighted to do or to be or to have. Okay, on to these ones which all mean kind of brave. You could be brave, courageous or heroic. If you're feeling like this, you're feeling ready to take on difficult or dangerous challenges, so it's very positive. You could be fearless, which obviously means you're not afraid of anything. You could also be feeling adventurous, which means you're in the mood for adventure, so slightly different from these ones. We often talk about gallant knights, and gallant here means brave or courageous. So the knights from hundreds of years ago, they were gallant men. You could also talk about an intrepid adventurer, an intrepid hero, which would mean a brave hero, a courageous hero. He perhaps this intrepid hero went on a daring mission, but he could be called daring as well. You can use daring for people or for things. And perhaps he made an audacious attempt to defeat the dragon, which means a daring attempt, a brave attempt. And so audacious also means brave. We could also say ballsy, which is obviously more slang than anything else. It's certainly not a nice sounding old word like audacious, but certainly in modern everyday English, you might use the word ballsy. You might say that it was a particularly manly attempt, and obviously this is from the word man, and so this is slightly different. Manly means like a man, and so it's closer to that word man. It's closer to macho, basically, manly, rather than just brave. But it can be used like brave in many situations. And I even thought that somebody who is determined is usually brave, although this word is certainly very different from, well, not very different, but certainly not as similar as all the others are to each other. If you're determined, you never give up. You keep trying and you stay focused on your goals or aims. It's a very positive word. And so we all need to be determined. We all need to be focused and to never give up until we reach our goals. You certainly need to be determined if you're going to learn a language. On to these words now, which are all concerning being careful in some kind of way. Careful and cautious are almost completely synonymous. If you're careful or you're cautious, you make sure you don't make a mistake, or you make sure you don't have some kind of problem somewhere. You're very careful not to be trapped in any kind of danger, and you're very cautious. You make sure that you are safe in some kind of way. The same if you're wary. If you're wary, you're making sure that you're safe. So you could be wary of strangers. You should be wary, perhaps, of strangers, because they may have evil intentions towards you. So make sure you are wary towards dangers. In the negative side, we have some similar ones over here to wary, because really anxious and apprehensive in particular both mean to be worried about some kind of future danger or problem. But these are very negative, and being wary could be construed as positive. It could be neutral also. It's not necessarily positive, but wary could be used in a positive way. Anxious is nearly always negative. Apprehensive is certainly negative. Attentive, we're not really quite the same as careful anymore, but we're very close still. If you're attentive, then you have great attention to everything that's going on around you. You always are, you're observant if you're attentive. You're paying attention to what's going on around you. So if you're watching a presentation, hopefully you're being attentive. I hope that you are all being attentive right now when you're watching this lesson, which means paying attention and not daydreaming. If you're vigilant, then you are always watching what's going on around you. So vigilant is certainly connected to watching and not the other senses. And so it's very similar to observant. If you're feeling vigilant, you're making sure you're watching what's going on around you. You're observant. You could also be called watchful. Now, if you're meticulous, you are very attentive to the details. And that's why I've put details in brackets. A person who's meticulous with money will count every penny. So you might even say that they're becoming greedy or mean or miserly or stingy. But if you're just generally meticulous, you're very attentive to details. And so perhaps certain professions, like those who work in law, solicitors, for example, who are dealing with documents, they have to be meticulous. They have to pay attention to the small details in every contract. And so it's a very positive word to be attentive to details, to be meticulous. If you're conscientious, I think this is quite similar to meticulous, because you make sure a conscientious student, and it's usually a student, is someone who always does every single part of their homework, and they do it carefully. They do it meticulously. They pay attention to all of the details, and they memorize everything that they are required to do. It's a very positive word, conscientious, very often used for students that do all their homework and they're attentive to the small details in the homework too. Underneath I've written diligent, which is hard-working basically. Hard-working, industrious, diligent, they all mean the same thing. And I thought that we were moving on to hard-working when we came down here. Now, the last words at the bottom are all related to curious. You can be curious when you want to find out something, when you want to know something. You're inquisitive. You have an inquiring mind if you're curious. And it's usually because you are intrigued by something. You're curious about something, you're intrigued by something, and so you ask questions. You have an inquiring mind, you become inquisitive. Now, ways of saying clever: you could call someone bright, you could call someone absolutely brilliant. So these three all really relate to intelligence and being clever. Quick-witted is clever, but it means you're very sharp and very quick with, usually with words. Wit is usually related to words. And if you're quick-witted, you have very quick responses. When somebody challenges you about something, you're very quick with a response, and a clever response as well. So quick-witted is very positive. Some politicians can be very quick-witted, not many of them. Some of them are very, they're the complete opposite, they're very slow. But if they're quick-witted, they're ready with an answer, they understand the situation thoroughly, they understand the situation in great detail, and so they're very quick with a response. Astute is similar to quick-witted, perhaps even closer though to perceptive. It means, and perceptive, I mean, really, you need to be attentive to be perceptive. Perceptive people observe what's around them and take great note of what's around them. So Sherlock Holmes is a very perceptive detective. He's very astute. He picks up on all the details around him, and he absorbs all the details, he manages to solve the crimes thanks to being so vigilant, thanks to being so observant. Insightful means that somebody is closer to wise, really, because if somebody has great insight, it means they have a profound understanding of the topic. So an insightful person will have deep understanding of a topic, usually acquired through many years of experience, and this is exactly where we come on to wise, which could even be called experienced sometimes. You know, wisdom only comes from experience, and so usually younger people aren't as wise as older people. Not always, there are exceptions, of course, but wisdom and insight, they come from experience. And rational I've also put here, although we're coming down to level-headed and sensible. Rational is very similar to level-headed and sensible. A rational person uses rationality and logic in their thought process. And so, personally, I think rationality is a very good thing. It's what helps us to overcome our emotions. And so we all need to be rational in order to get that sense of freedom, really, because if we're at the mercy of our emotions, our passions, we don't really have much in the way of freedom. If you're confident, then you're ready to deal with any kind of challenge around you. You're strong enough to take on new challenges. A confident person will always be ready to take on a new challenge. And self-assured is very similar to confident, which can sometimes be called self-confident. I mean, really, you want to be confident before the speaking exam, because if you're not confident before the speaking exam, if you're anxious or nervous or worried, then you're going to make mistakes, because we all make mistakes when we're anxious. I know I do. And for that reason, please be confident and self-assured when you go into an exam. Now, if you're assertive, you're basically bossy, but bossy would be a negative word. An assertive person is someone who is not afraid to give people instructions, to give people orders even, and to boss people around, because obviously in a large company you need a good boss. You need someone who's good at giving instructions, and so an assertive person is a boss, but a good boss, somebody who's good at telling people what to do. If you're cool-headed or composed, it means you're calm in a difficult situation. So these are slightly different now than confident. It means you're calm in a difficult situation. You don't get emotional. You don't let your emotions get the better of you when you're in a dangerous situation, for example. And so if you're in the military, I would suggest that you probably need to be cool-headed and composed in battle. You can't be too scared. You can't be frightened and anxious and desperate, because you won't make such a good soldier. You would need to be cool-headed and composed in battle. And if you are level-headed, we're back to rational, really. A level-headed person is someone who's very well balanced. So we all need to be sensible. We all need to be level-headed in lots of different situations, or else again we let our emotions get the better of us. So a very positive word really, level-headed, and the same for sensible. A practical person is someone who's not just theoretical. Practical is very easily understood when we compare it with theoretical. A theoretical person understands theory very easily, and they deal with theories and ideas. A practical person deals with real objects. And so if somebody is practical, it often means they're good with their hands. If you're practical in a certain subject, that means you're good at doing that subject and not just thinking about the theory of that subject. And obviously you can even talk about practical subjects and theoretical subjects, but obviously people who are practical, they're very often good with their hands, they're handy. Responsible can be positive. It means that you're grown up and you're ready to take responsibility for your actions. And so it's a very positive word to be responsible. The younger you are, the less responsible you are, because you've had very little experience in the world, and so you often don't take responsibility for your actions. But responsible people are ready to say that they have made a mistake, for example, and it's important to do so, obviously, because we all make mistakes. And a responsible person will be willing to say when they've done something wrong and even take the punishment for doing something wrong. Okay, a reliable person will always be on time. When they agree to meet at a certain time, they'll always fulfill their promises. They don't break their promises, reliable people. A trustworthy person you can trust. They are worthy of your trust. So you can tell them a secret and they will keep your secret. A conscientious person, we've already done, is someone who is very hard working and pays attention to all the details at the same time. Now we're coming on to some neutral ones. These are somewhere in the middle, although some may be considered negative, especially devious. That might go over here a bit more. But crafty, cunning, sly and shrewd, these are all forms of being clever. We say as sly as a fox. And I hope that can give you an idea of what I mean by sly, crafty, cunning or shrewd. It's somebody who is very clever at getting what they want. It's especially somebody who uses their brain very well to get what they want. So it can be a little bit selfish. It's more over to the negative rather than to the positive. But we all have to be sly. We have to look after our own interests in a lot of different situations. And if we don't have any of these feelings or characteristics, it's not usually good, because we're not able to look after ourselves very well. And so we all need to be as sly as a fox sometimes. But you can talk about a shrewd plan, a cunning plan. You can use this with many other these with many other nouns as well. If you're confused or perplexed, you don't know what's going on. The same if you're bewildered. You have no idea what's going on. You're in a puzzled state, and that would be the next one. Like when you've got a very difficult exercise, a very difficult English exercise, it might make you feel very confused. I know a lot of the grammar is very confusing in any language, and so I think these words are very appropriate for when you're a student of a language and you're doing a particularly difficult exercise. You may even muddle up different concepts, in which case you are muddled. So please remember, muddle up. It's a great phrasal verb to use when you get two things in the wrong places. When, for example, you might muddle up perfect continuous with, I'm not sure, a gerund. That would be a confusion. You're muddling up a gerund with present continuous. Don't do that. If you're flabbergasted or dumbfounded or taken aback or stupefied, you're absolutely shocked. Okay, they're all good words to say that I was absolutely shocked, really surprised, astonished. If you're optimistic or hopeful, these are pretty similar to confident. You have hope for the future. If you're exhausted, worn out, fatigued, debilitated, knackered, shattered, you're really, really tired. Okay, these all mean really, really tired. If you're embarrassed, you have a very awkward feeling, a very uncomfortable feeling because of what's going on around you. Usually your cheeks go red when you feel embarrassed. So it's when you blush. It's another word for cheeks going red. When you blush, you feel embarrassed. And so if you go and buy something, maybe you pick up a lot of shopping, you go to buy it, and then you realise you've forgotten your wallet, you feel really embarrassed, you feel absolutely mortified because there's a large queue of people waiting for their shopping and you have to make them wait now while you take all of your shopping off and put it back. You probably feel a little bit embarrassed anyway. Maybe some of you wouldn't, I'm not sure. Be careful here because humiliated is a bit stronger, but it is related to shame, which you can see in that word, ashamed. And so I put it here with these ones because it is connected, but humiliated is the worst of these. If somebody humiliates you, they make you feel as little as possible. They make you feel awful, really like nothing. And so teachers could humiliate someone in the class. It wouldn't mean they're a very nice teacher, it would mean they're a very nasty kind of person. It would mean they're a malicious teacher or a nasty teacher. But maybe they, when somebody gets really bad results in the test, they hold up their paper and they show everyone and say, look at this idiot, look what he wrote here, look what he wrote here. They are humiliating the student then. They're making the student feel as little as possible. Very nasty. Okay, if you are guilty or culpable or liable or reprehensible or accountable, all of these words are similar to responsible. They all mean that you were the one who committed the crime. I mean, if you're guilty, you committed the crime. If you're culpable, think about culprit. It's from the same Latin root. If you're culpable, you committed the crime. If you're liable, it means you need to be punished for this crime because you were responsible. And if you commit a reprehensible action, it means an action which was bad and you need to be punished for it again. And so all of these are related to being guilty of something, and it means that you must be punished. You must be held accountable for your actions. On to very negative ones now. If you're vindictive, you bear a grudge. You want revenge. And so a vindictive person is someone who always takes revenge on anybody who does something bad to them. And so it's very negative. If you're aggressive, you're belligerent. You're hostile. And it means you're violent. I mean, these ones are all pretty close actually with violent. They all mean that the person likes to hit other people when they feel angry, or maybe even not when they feel angry. If you're bitter, you don't forgive and you don't forget. A bit like vindictive. Vindictive and bitter are certainly connected. A bitter person is someone who hasn't forgiven someone else for some reason. They still remember some wrong that was done to them. If you're antagonistic, I think I can be like this, you're quite argumentative. You enjoy a battle, you enjoy a fight, you enjoy an argument. If you're confrontational, exactly the same as antagonistic. You enjoy a confrontation, you enjoy conflict. A warmonger, if somebody is warmongering, they love battle, they love conflicts, they want a war to happen. If you're bad-tempered, you're often in a bad mood, you're angry, you're frustrated, you're anxious, you're bad-tempered. If you're hot-headed, you can't control your emotions, you're passionate, and it can be very negative, although it doesn't have to necessarily be negative. I perhaps should have put this one in the centre somewhere. But you lose control of your emotions, very often leading to something violent. And if you're malicious or nasty, you enjoy other people's suffering. You take pleasure when other people suffer. So a very negative word, certainly, malicious and nasty. Cheeky is an excellent word to remember. We use it all the time, and it means a bit naughty, not very naughty, so it's more this way. But you would talk about a cheeky child. If a child comes up and makes fun of you and you haven't done anything wrong to them, that child is being cheeky. But even if you're standing in a queue of people and someone just walks along and there's a really long queue and they just push in front of you. Push in is a good phrasal verb for when they jump the queue. They jump in front of you. That person is really cheeky. They're doing something which is naughty, really. I mean, it's not terrible, it's not killing someone, but it's really cheeky because they're acting like they're better than you, or they deserve a place further forward in the queue than you. So it's a very bad thing. Well, not very bad, but it's not a nice thing to be cheeky. But we certainly use it for kids when they're a bit naughty, and even for adults when they do something a little bit annoying or a little bit naughty. They're cheeky. A cocky person is very full of themselves. It's almost like arrogant, although perhaps not that negative. Arrogant would be more negative. But a cocky person is too self-confident. That's the way I could describe it. Too self-confident. They're cocky. They're full of themselves. It's also another way we say it, full of themselves. They think that they are better than other people, and that's the problem. They're too self-confident. If you're self-satisfied or smug, these are really negative, and it's when you're pleased with yourself, but for doing something perhaps which wasn't that great. Somebody could be self-satisfied if they get the answer right in the class. Some students are very smug, very self-satisfied when they get the answer right. In other words, they're very pleased with themselves, but nobody likes looking at their satisfaction. Nobody likes seeing their smile. We often say a smug grin, and it's a grin which is kind of really pleased with yourself, but where everybody's looking at you and thinking, what a horrible smile. So there is, these are usually negative. Self-satisfied doesn't have to be, it could be more this way, but smug is always negative. It means pleased with yourself. An arrogant person thinks they're better than everybody else, they're superior. A stuck-up person is a snobby person. They're also arrogant. They think that they are above other people around them. Very often these are used for the rich. Very often they're used for rich people who think that they're better than the poorer people around them. A condescending person is arrogant. They think that they are above you. Again, they're superior. A pompous person, I think they're condescending and in a conservative and traditional way. I think it's when people obey traditions, conservative traditions, that we often say they're pompous. When they obey certain ceremonies and things like that, or they get very dressed up and then they think they're better than you, that would be a pompous person. Someone who is boastful, loves telling other people about how great they are, so it's similar to arrogant. They're very immodest. They prefer to tell everybody how great they are rather than to keep quiet about how great they are. And so they are big-headed. Again, this means boastful. A big-headed person is someone who tells everybody how great they are. A proud or vain person is very often pleased with themselves again. All of these are pretty similar, but a vain person is in love with their own appearance. It's especially for someone who is narcissistic, who looks in the mirror all the time and admires what they look like. Or who looks at photos of themselves all the time, or videos of themselves all the time, and thinks, oh, don't I look fantastic? Conceited would be very similar. If you're greedy, then you don't like buying things for other people. You can call them mean, miserly. A miser is someone who keeps all their money to themselves. You could call them stingy. We very often do. You could call them tight or tight-fisted. We use both of them. And you could also call them niggardly. It's just someone who doesn't like spending money. Okay, we've done these already, really. Anxious or worried or distressed is when you're worried about the future. I think it's when you're afraid about something which will happen. It's the opposite. I mean, it's basically when you're pessimistic. It's the opposite to optimistic or hopeful. You can either have hope about the future, or you can be afraid about the future. And hope and fear are almost opposites, really, when we think about it. And so all of these are related to being apprehensive about the future, worried about what might happen, being nervous, being uptight, which means being very nervous, doing things which show that you're nervous. I think I sometimes appear uptight in a lot of these videos because perhaps I've had a stressful day and I'm not relaxed and ready to take the lesson. If you're desperate, you feel like there's no hope for the future, that it's certainly going to be bad, that you're doomed, you're hopeless. And if you're petrified, horrified or startled, you're scared in some way. If you're alarmed, you're scared in some way. If you're appalled, you're shocked by some kind of disgusting incident that's happened. If you're dismayed, you're pretty hopeless again. You're without hope. You think that everything's going to go badly. And the last ones down here are all related to being very, very sad. If you're miserable, you're generally sad from day to day. You're not cheerful, opposite of cheerful, really. Same if you're downcast. You've got your head down and your face is down. If you're devastated, usually someone has died. So you're very, very, very sad about a terrible event. If you're wretched, then often we would say this for somebody who has no self-respect. They think that they're an awful person, and they are an awful person. That would be a wretched person. If you're woeful, you're extremely sad, and if you're melancholic, you can't stop being sad. Okay, all of these are in the dictionary with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples. If I haven't given you enough examples, please go to the dictionary. It's one click away. You've got your mouse in your hand. Click that mouse on Oxford Dictionary, write in that word and press more examples, and you'll find loads of examples. So there are plenty of other examples out there. Thanks everybody for watching. Please click like if you've enjoyed this lesson, and I hope to see you all soon.